Alright, today I will start with something quite hilarious. So, where is the picture? Oh, there it is. Virtual PG has a supercarrier, not even blocking out what system he is ratting in. Is he baiting or what? Seems like the perfect chance in getting the first supercarrier kill. Now, my friend sent me this last night and I was laughing for about maybe an hour after seeing this. Because how can I mean, do players really believe that I have a super carrier? That's kind of funny. But the other funny thing is that they couldn't kill my revelation, and they expect to kill a Supercapital, which is 10 times tankier than the revelation. Yeah, it's not happening. Anyway, this is the Nyx. I have to admit, this is probably the best looking Supercapital. I mean, Gallente ships aren't usually known to be, pretty, but the Nyx is definitely a gorgeous ship. Has these unique and I would say very attractive shapes to it. Kind of reminds me on the Atlantis from Stargate Atlantis. If you watched that show. Now let's take a look at the ship trait description. The roll bonus on the Nyx is the same as the roll bonus on the other supercarriers. Advanced light fighter upgrade bonus will give you plus 20% light fighter damage, plus 75% light fighter optimal range. The Nyx will have a lot of DPS. Heavy fighter operation bonus per level will give you plus 20% heavy fighter damage, plus 7.5% heavy fighter optimal range. Advanced fighter bonus per level will give you plus 30% fighter EHP, plus 5% fighter flight velocity, minus 5% fighter signature radius. The advanced carrier command bonus per level will give you plus 5% flight velocity, minus 2% inertia modifier, plus 30% armor repair. Expert skirmish command burst will give you plus 5% skirmish burst strength, plus 3% armor burst strength, plus 100% burst range. Expert jump drive will give you plus 0.5 lighter range and minus 5% jump drive capacitor need. And the last one, advanced defense deception burst operation bonus, will give you plus 5% bonus to defense deception burst projector damage strength, and plus 5% defense deception burst projector optimal range. The Nyx has 5 fighters, 5 fighter tubes, 2 high slots, 5 medium slots, 8 low slots for combat and 4 engineering rigs. Primarily a armor tank. Overall, the armor is a little bit lower than the other Supercapitals, but it does get a very nice repair bonus. Fantastic capacitors, and well, the Nyx is okay in terms of speed. I mean, they're Supercapitals, they are all slow, but the Nyx will have the highest DPS output. I was almost 100% confident that the Wyvern will be the one, but nope, I was wrong. The Nyx and the Hell have the highest DPS outputs. Now this is the Defense Disruption Burst, and this module is very nasty. It reduces shield and armor resistance by 56.25%. And here you can take a look at the optimal range. I mean, this module is going to be, it lasts 64 seconds, so your target will have significantly reduced resistance on shield and armor for a whole minute. In the medium slots I have the same usual setup that I have on my super carriers here, and the superior recovery module is also very useful. As for the fighters, they have a very nice optimal range, but the damage output on the fighters on this ship and on the Hell is going to be really strong. They have the highest DPS output, but the Nyx and the Hell alike are not the tankiest. They have lower tank, but they have fantastic DPS. And this thing, with the special high slot modules, is probably going to be able to push about 500,000 DPS with the drum bombs until the effect of the short burst of 500,000 DPS, which honestly is terrifying when you think about it. As for the rigs, now I have added a bit more armor volume to this thing and some resistance and some armor resistance, just to try to cover for the lack of the 20% resistance from the skill bonus, but you also can use the thermal circulation, and I have some pretty good stats on the armor, but not as good as the stats on the Eon, which honestly is fine. I mean, this thing has a lot of DPS, and the Nyx is all about that DPS, although they're still quite tanky, even though they're not as tanky if we compare them with the other Supercapital, with the other Supercarriers. Now, as for the implants, as I mentioned, you have the thermal circulation, and you also can use the bombard implant. Now, first I'll be playing around with the thermal circulation, because the thermal circulation implant is, well, it can help with the tank, and overall it is usable on all armor tanks, so you can definitely use the thermal circulation on your Nyx if you don't have the bombard tactic, but I would prefer, and I would actually recommend, if you have one of these ships, use the bombard tactic implant, because you get some crazy DPS out of these ships. And yes, I forgot to add fuel.
Docking request accepted.
That's to be expected. I just woke up and, well, my brain is still loading, so let me go and let me add some fuel. Kinda funny that I have heavy water as fuel, and these things drink a lot of water. You can say that these ships are very thirsty. Yeah, I know, sounds weird, but yeah, these things do drink a lot of fuel. And let's do this, 5 million, and let's refuel. And the Nyx gulped all that with ease. Alright, now I have refueled this thing. Let's undock and let's take a look at the
undocking.
Let's take a look at the active tank that this thing can pull. Now, as expected, since it doesn't have the same tank bonus, same resistance bonus as some of the other supercarriers, you can really expect it to be on the same level of tanky as some of the other supercarriers, but it can still pull some impressive numbers, and overall it still is a supercarrier, and they're known for their tank, so you can expect some nice armor on the Nyx. Although I have to admit, this thing looks awesome. I mean, just look at the hull of this thing. It's beautiful. This ship is one of the most beautiful ships in the game right now, and I love it. Alright, well, every module is now running, and let's take a look at now. It has 65 million hit points, which honestly, yeah, it's awesome. It's honestly really tanky, but it is not as tanky as some of the other super capitals that you have seen on the channel, which honestly is to be expected. The other stats look nice. The DPS is fantastic. Alright, next build, you can do something like this: sacrifice one adaptive and the reactive to add 1 micro warp drift guide, and to add that fighter DPS module. And now the Nyx does have improved DPS, and it has improved fighter flight velocity, both of which are very important for combat. Extra speed is important to catch more ships, to make combat easier. The extra DPS is also very useful and helpful to destroy the target. 47 million hit points, 85, 92, 92 and 88%. And it still has a lot of armor to go with, so overall a fantastic tank, and 60,344.14 DPS when I activate the extra DPS module. And here you can take a look at the fighter speed. Now, technically, the applied DPS on the target gets improved by 106 to 150% when you apply those new modules on your target. And you will see that in action today when I go to the combat part. Now you can do a armor plate tank on the Nyx. You can also combine armor plates and armor repairs alongside with extra tank. When I say extra tank, you can combine that with extra adaptive armor harness, with reactive armor harness, and of course we can add the damage control. But if you do a build like that, you will have to sacrifice the micro warp drift guide and the extra DPS module. And it means in that case you have to specialize the ship to be used only against battleships and against other capitals. And you can also do a build like this with the normal damage control. The normal damage control can be more useful than the new one in a lot of instances, especially if you have a loggy at your side. Basically you can actively use the damage control, but the other damage control is mostly a panic button. Both have their advantage and disadvantage, and both are honestly quite interesting and useful modules in the game. Now let's take a look at the maximum amount of tank that I can get from a build like this. Now I know it looks a bit weird to have those shield items there. Well, they're not shield. They are combat items, not defense items. So don't hybrid tank your Nyx. It's not going to end well. 216 million hit points, 96, 98, 98, and 97. 7.7 million hit points. Not bad. Pretty solid. And the normal damage roll also increases the resistance on all damage types, but it doesn't last as long as the new one. But it doesn't get destroyed when you activate it, so you can basically use it as much as you like. And again you can do a build like this. Also does look interesting. Or you can even add more of these damage amplifiers, and that will sacrifice even more tank, but you will gain a lot more DPS. So the Nyx is definitely leaning more towards that DPS side. The ship is honestly screaming to me that I should take advantage of its DPS output. I mean, it already has a fantastic DPS output, has a fantastic tank, so you might as well expand on the DPS. That seems to be a very interesting thing that you can do on these things. It still has 40 million hit points, 78, 88, 89, and 83% resistance. You also have the carrier module, the Supercarrier module, that does improve the stats. It does add some very nice repair as well. 69,000 hit points, very nice. Now, that was the tank build. It will be time to do something that is leaning more towards the DPS side of this ship. So let me quickly remove the integrations. You can do the cheaper version of this build with the normal rigs, but I just prefer integrations on these ships because they're just so expensive. The integrations cost less than the ship, so you can easily add integrations and not worry about it. The DPS build will have 4 fighter burst aerators, but we can do 3 burst aerators and 1 for alpha damage. It also works, but now I have 72,448.87 DPS with the heavy fighters. Now I will add 3 damage mods to improve the DPS of the fighters, and I will swap the implant to the drone worms. And these things went from scary to straight terrifying, because now I realized, this is the moment where I actually realized that if I can reduce the enemy resistance, so that's, let's say from 95 it goes to 70, then my applied DPS is going to skyrocket, which technically means that it can be counted as increasing your own DPS. So if I'm capable of having 350,000 DPS with bombs, you can add 56% to that, and you get the amount of DPS that theoretically you can put out of this ship. So we're looking at perhaps, I don't know, 650,000 DPS on the Nyx with the bombs. It doesn't last long. It is a short burst of DPS until the bombs run out, but it is still some horrifying DPS output that this thing can deliver. And this is why I believe that the Nyx will be players' favorite
Undocking.
Supercapital, just because of that insane DPS amount that you can deliver. That's the insane amount of DPS that you can unleash on your target. Nothing can tag. Nothing can tag that. That's just too much DPS. Which makes this thing interesting, but it is also pretty much paper in Supercapital standards. The Nyx will definitely get destroyed very quickly with a build like this. But the goal is to kill the target before they kill you. 18.8 million hit points, 74, 66, 69, and 53% resistance. $109,858.72 hit points, 72 DPS. And now we have the drum bombs that triple your DPS, and then you also have the new modules that reduce the defense of your target by 56.25%. So yeah, we're looking at some interesting DPS, to say the least. Now we can also do a passive tank with armor plates and adaptives. I mean, you can basically come up with a lot of different options. These are just some of the ideas that I have for this thing. A passive build if you're in a fleet, an active tank that can also work if you are in a fleet, but it can also work if you aren't in a fleet for PvE. For PvE on the Nyx, active armor tanking is definitely the way to go, but I can see that even passive shield tanking might work, although I wouldn't be doing that because it already has a good bonus on armor repair, but it has the same fantastic passive shield regeneration, which means technically you can passive shield tank it. All of the Supercarriers can be passively tanked. It's just that I like to take advantage of the ship bonuses as they are intended to be, you know, you're supposed to take advantage of the ship skills and of the bonuses. So it already has a good bonus on armor repair. You can do the armor build, but at the same time you can also do a passive shield tank on this monster. So, time to have some fun with the Nyx. Now, I'll demonstrate how nasty the Nyx is in PvP, since it reduces the opponent's resistance. It is going to be, and it's not only for one ship, it reduces the resistance for all ships within the effective range of the bubble of the Supercarrier, and that is evil. That's very evil. It's honestly very evil. And well, let's see what happens here. Now this is the Eon that I was flying before, and the Eon has the best armor resistance. Basically, it has a bonus on armor, and it is using the same armor tank build that I showed you before. So, and I'll also show you the resistance that it has reduced by activating those modules. I think I'll just add the screenshot on the screen there, because that's just less of a clutter on the screen. But yeah, drum bombs combined with the defense disruption results in some insane applied DPS. And this is a very funny moment here, because usually a supercarrier can easily tank another supercarrier, but if you are fighting a Nyx that has these modules, things might be a bit different, because the Nyx can reduce your resistance. Now it will still be tanky, and for 64 seconds you will be taking a immense amount of damage, but eventually the tank will fail.
Damaged.
Now the Nyx doesn't have much tank if we compare it to the other Supercapitals, but it also reduces the tank of your opponent. So when we apply the math, the amount of hit points is actually kind of the same if we apply the defense disruption on the target, which does kind of work in the favor of the Nyx, and I see how the ship was intended to be used. Overall, a very interesting tactic, and this also works really well for PvE. You can reduce the resistance of the PvE ships, which means in return you will be doing more damage to them, and in return means that you will be clearing PvE content much faster. And again, this gives the Nyx a huge advantage over the other carriers, at least in terms of PvE. In PvP, everything is not revolving around DPS. Of course, in PvP, tank does win over high DPS, and if we give, let's say, a tank Nyx versus a tank any other Supercapital, any other Supercarrier, then the Nyx would probably end up losing because of the lower stats. And I'm talking if they are built in the same way, because the other Supercapitals will most likely have much higher tank, even when the defense disruption unit is working on their ship. So there's honestly so many factors to include that
We're under attack.
in the end it does come down to player skill and of course player builds. But I can expect the Supercapitals to be all tanked to the teeth. The only Supercapital that might give some problems to the Nyx is the Wyvern. And the Wyvern is definitely one of the tankiest, if not the tankiest. It has some insane passive shield regeneration capabilities. I actually talked with one of my friends last night, and we were doing some math with the Wyvern. Now I came up to the result that it was able to tank about 180 to 200,000 DPS without caring, and then you can add a shield booster or two, and then you enhance the tank even more, which is actually kind of hilarious when you think about it. So the Wyvern has definitely the crazy tank going forward. So it will be fun to match up all of these super carriers in a long 1v1, and that's what I'm planning to do. Basically, I'll have these ships on a equal footing with the same skills, same implants, same everything. So I'm very curious to see how that will go. But now back to our little encounter here. So we got bumped, and both of our ships were going away at each other at a high rate of speed. And somehow we ended up at over 100 kilometers. Actually, no, above 80. It was actually 80 kilometers. Somehow we ended up 80 kilometers away from each other. That was kind of funny. And now I'm approaching. Both Supercarriers are now approaching. The tank of the Eon is slowly falling down. Now this is what I'm talking about. The amount of DPS that we can do with the Nyx once the tank of the target is affected is insane. It's basically like shooting the Eon with all of its resistance down. Now, since I am using the bombard implant without the remote reload, I just have to pull back the drones, reload the bombs, and then launch the drones back. That's how I use this thing, and then I just launch them back, and then they will start doing crazy amount of DPS again. The defense, the new damage control is also very useful. I found that module to work really well in critical situations, and surprisingly, the defense disruption doesn't affect the hull, which is kinda funny when you think about it. Why doesn't it affect hull? Well, probably because they want to have some form of balance, because they realize that if you have a Nyx crippling your hull, then the new energizer damage control is not going to be useful. So yeah, it would kind of kill the purpose of the module, although you will still have some hull tank, but not anywhere near as good as the hull tank. As the hull tank would be if the new module would be applied. Now the tank of the Nyx is also slowly falling down. Both ships' tanks are actually falling down because the Nyx with this build doesn't have a lot of tank, so it doesn't take much to break the tank, but it has so much armor that it will take a while for the armor to go down. But the Eon is in a lot more trouble because the Eon has tank, has capacitor, but the Nyx is crippling the resistance on the ship, which improves the applied damage. Now the Nyx capacitor is getting replenished by the carrier cover module. The cover module can actually work to replace the capacitor battery, because with the passive tank you don't really need batteries, because the cover module will basically supply your ship with capacitor, which is honestly quite awesome when you think about it. It is very impressive actually. That cover module is so useful and it can be so important that it is honestly a must-have. It can also help with the active tank. I actually have my capacitor stable here with everything running with that cover module active, and the Eon is also capacitor stable when you have that module active. The Eon has a better capacitor, by the way, and you can also add one capacitor battery so that you have a emergency button for the capacitor as well if you end up getting neutralized. But the cover module on these ships is honestly awesome. It does feel like a constantly running capacitor booster, which is impressive by itself, to be honest. And now the Eon has reached into hull, which means that the panic button will be active, and the panic button is now the whole tank on that thing is going to be vastly improved. The Nyx armor is at 59% and it is also slowly falling down. Who knows, perhaps I'll have to use the whole tank module on the Nyx We will find out. But honestly, it's been very fun to match up these Supercapitals to see what they can do, so that you guys know what to expect from the ships if you start. Hold a second, I got carried away about something in the background. Never mind, I forgot what I was talking about. It always happens when I get distracted, my apologies. Anyway, both of the ships are now basically heavily damaged, although the Eon is definitely in much more trouble.
We're under attack.
I keep using the bombard tactic each time it comes out of the cooldown. Look, I mean, these effects are so beautiful. They did a fantastic job with the effects here. The Eon does impact the capacitor on a lot of ships, and it is capable of basically killing the capacitor of a whole fleet. I mean, I'm trying to figure out which one of these ships might be the best for me in my case, but I think the Wyvern is definitely the way to go for me because of the crazy tank. However, each one of these Supercapitals have their own unique thing about them, which does mean that all of these ships will be very useful in their own way here. And I also noticed the Nyx is the smallest one. However, the Nyx is also the best looking. I actually not really sure which one looks better, the Wyvern or the Nyx. I would actually have to say that the Nyx kind of looks better because it has that. I don't know. It looks awesome. It just looks awesome. It doesn't look like a Gallente ship, honestly. It looks like Gallente ships are usually ugly. I mean, look at the Celestis, look at the Imicus, look at most of the Gallente ships. Most of them are some weird looking potatoes. But then you have ships like the Megatron, Hyperion, and then there is the Nyx, which looks beautiful. This honestly the best looking Supercarrier in the game. And then there's the Eon, which looks like a half-finished product. Honestly, why does the Eon look like a half-finished ship? I don't know. I made a joke that the Amar Empire ran out of funds because of how expensive they build their ships, so they decided to they decided to, you know, slap some hangers on a half-finished ship, and that's how the Eon was built. But yeah, the Eon definitely has that weird look to it. It's like a half-finished ship, but at the same time, it also looks kind of interesting because it makes sense that it looks the way it does right now. And well, now the Eon is in its final moments of existence. You know, I kind of feel bad destroying these ships. I kind of do feel bad destroying them, but you know, a test has to be made, and a ship has to be sacrificed. So it is what it is. Oh well, we will enjoy the fireworks. Big ships make big explosions, and big explosions are very nice to look at. And there goes a Supercapital. Another one bites the dust. This is going to be a very good explosion. There we go. Nice. So, this might be the shortest Supercapital versus Supercapital that I did so far. Mostly because of how the Nyx works. And here we can take a look at the the wreck of the ship. Surprisingly, the half of the ship that does look interesting is mostly intact, but the hangar and the warp core location has been completely blown to bits. The wrecks on these ships is definitely interesting to look at, and yeah, this is how a Supercarrier wreck looks. Interesting, doesn't it? Oh well. It was very fun to test this out. Alright. So, will be time for me to change the fighters. And oh, I forgot one important thing. Let me show you the kill here. It tanked 141 million. It tanked 14 million hit points. And here you can take a look at the build that I used. So, time to change into the light fighters, and then we can go and do a laboratory mission with the Nix. Now, how fast will this thing clear the mission? That's the question. Since it does reduce the resistance of the target, I assume that this will probably be my fastest laboratory run to date. But again, we will find out. The most annoying part about these ships is the fact that changing fighters takes 8 years, as you can see here. And also have to add the proper fighters. Somehow I blew up some of my light fighters. I think when I killed the Wyvern, I forgot to remove some of the fighters, some of the light fighters, and unfortunately those have been yeeted. So I have to do a mix of light and heavy, but it should do the job fine. Oh, I have Templars. Okay. Oh, yeah. I'm missing the. I'm missing 4 or 5 of these fighters. Alright, let me replace this one, and let me add some heavy ones. Okay, everything should be set and ready, and let's do a laboratory mission. Alright.
Warp drive active.
Let's warp to the laboratory. I'm looking at something in the background here that gets my attention quite often. But don't worry, I'll be focused on the PvE aspect here in a moment. So, warping to the laboratory mission. I have to admit, it took a while for me to it took a while for me to find a good screenshot for a thumbnail for the Nix. I mean, it looks very good, but finding a good angle on this thing is kind of difficult, especially when a ship doesn't want to listen to what you're clicking at. And I still haven't repaired my game's client. That's why I have so many bugs running around that are a little bit annoying, honestly.
We're under attack.
And also, I am recording this on patch day. Surprisingly, actually for a second I thought that the update, that the maintenance was delayed. like for one day, because the announcement said that it was tomorrow. They messed up with the with the announcement date there. So the initial impression of the DPS is, I can tell you, the new modules do have an impact on the enemy, on the NPC ship resistance. It does seem like it is killing them much faster and much more efficient. Now, since these modules have a area of effect, basically 250 kilometer, within the 250 kilometer bubble, everything will have its resistance crippled. You can easily use this type of build for PvE, and as you can see, it is mowing them down very quickly. And I have to admit, this might be my fastest laboratory run so far. 50,000 DPS with the light fighters, which is actually very similar to the cold DPS of heavy fighters with a tanky build. Very impressive, actually. Very impressive DPS output on the Nyx. So when I started with the Nyx, I was very convinced that the Wyvern would be the highest DPS Supercarrier, but turns out I was wrong. And honestly, I'm actually happy that I was wrong, because
we're being warp scrambled.
Because now I know that the Wyvern and the Eon are the tanky supercarriers, the Nyx and Hell are for DPS. Both have fantastic use, and actually you can make both do good DPS, but they're just the Nyx apply DPS with the new defense disruption modules is just unmatched. The other supercarriers can get close. Now you can use the same module, the same defense disruption module on the other supercarriers easily. You can do that actually, but this ship will have
Enemy ships
a
detected.
bonus on the module, so the effect on this thing
under
will
attack.
be enhanced. And of course, you can do a mix of special
under
modules on these
attack.
ships, which is actually a very interesting thing to do. You can mix them up, and in some of the future videos that I will do with these ships, I will be mixing them up just to show you what you can do with them. It kind of just popped in my mind that you can actually do these interesting things with the new modules. The new modules are pretty awesome. Now I do expect them to be changed, to be nerfed in some cases. I honestly expect some of the supercarriers to be nerfed. Their passive shield regeneration might get changed a little bit in the future, but at the same time it might remain the same. It depends on how they perform. I mean, at the moment there is no supercarriers running around, so there is no data to base the stats on. However, based on the testing results here, yeah, there is definitely going to be some balancing adjustments done to these ships. And honestly, so far they have been surprisingly very fun to fly. I have been enjoying them quite a bit, and the one thing that is very attractive about, at least in my case here, what is attracting me towards the supercarriers is their tank. I love passive tanking, and the Wyvern and the Hell, actually both the Wyvern and Hell can both do a fantastic passive shield tank. So if I ever decide to get one of these ships, it will probably be a Wyvern, just because of that crazy passive shield tank. It can tank so much damage. And of course I can also add the shield booster on top just to enhance that shield performance even more. There's so many different builds that you can do with the Supercarriers. I thought about doing 2 adaptives, 1 reactive damage control, then dual extenders and a shield booster. That would be a pretty interesting build, especially if you consider the fact that you can easily add even more passive tank with the rigs. So I mean, there's just so many ideas that I have covered. Most of them I have covered in the previous Wyvern video. I covered a lot of builds in the Wyvern video, honestly. So now I'm just getting even more ideas. But if I were to present all of my ideas, I would be making 5-hour-long videos, and well, that is a bit too long. So I can't do that, but I can do them in different videos that I've planned. I'll definitely show you a lot more interesting ideas and builds that you can do with these ships. Well then, this was definitely the fastest laboratory clear that I had in a while. Definitely the fastest clear with a Supercarrier. Overall, it was definitely fun to fly the Nyx, an awesome ship. And if you want to support me and if you want to see more, feel free to like and subscribe. It does help out a lot. And with that being said, stay safe, fly safe, and as always, I'll see you next time.